United Methodist Church has many different agencies, creating resources for all aspects of ministry, from discipleship to communication to leadership and more. Knowing where to go to find exactly what you're looking for, or discovering resources you didn't know you needed or didn't even know the denomination offered, used to be a challenge, but not anymore. On today's episode of the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast, we're going to learn about the online spot you need to bookmark today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. My name is Dan Wunderlich. I'm a United Methodist pastor, and our guest today is Tyrus Sturgis. Tyrus is the Director of Leader Communications for United Methodist Communications. Tyrus, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's begin by having you share a bit about yourself and what you do for United Methodist Communications.
Well, Dan, in essence, my job is to resource leaders throughout the connection. That means to create and provide informational, instructional, and inspirational content, primarily communications content, but also to provide a platform so church leaders can access resources and information from other agencies and other sources, even outside the United Methodist Church. And that's, of course, where ResourceUMC comes in. There, I have a team of about 5 people, and we not only address communications in English, but also Spanish, Korean. We're looking to expand into French, of course, and eventually Portuguese as well. And it's not only about resourcing leaders in those languages, but also taking into account any cultural factors or specific needs that those leaders need. So we're trying to be really expansive and really purposeful about how we address and resource leaders now. And my job is to manage all of that.
That's really great. I know it's easy, at least I'll speak for myself. It's easy for me to think really only of the American church at times, but the United Methodist denomination truly is an international denomination.
Correct. Global denomination, international, and even within the United States, I think there are specific markets and pockets we need to target and do a better job of reaching. And that's what we're trying to do with our language areas and with our culturally focused areas.
That's awesome. Well, as we alluded to in the intro, the denomination and its various agencies create so much content and so many resources. And sadly, there was a time when it was hard to know and remember where to go to find what you're looking for. I'll even admit, as the host of this podcast and a former writer for MyCom, the easiest way for me to find my articles was to Google MyCom and my last name to find the stuff that I'd written or recorded. But you are here today to tell us about this incredible new site we have in ResourceUMC.org. Let's start with the story behind it. And how did the idea first come about for you and your team?
Well, Dan, you hit on it. I think it's a response to a felt need. And I worked at higher ed and ministry before coming to UMCom, and also used to Google to find resources and have to hop around from website to website. I mean, 10 to 12, all 13 agency websites to find information I need. And I discovered I wasn't the only one. Our research team here at UMCom did some research and found out that this was a problem for people throughout the connection. One communicator, Mark Doyle, stated it's like drinking water from a fire hose. There are so many resources out there from so many different areas. We don't know where to start, and sometimes we don't even finish in the right place. Something needs to be done about it. So when our leadership team got together, one of the focal areas was, how do we provide a platform that centralizes this information, that serves as a hub of sorts for all of the great resources and information from across connections, specifically those being produced by our general agencies. And that's where the Resource UMC came along.
Well, I would guess that coordinating between all of the agencies and entities was and may still even be a challenge. I'm sure all of our listeners have a hard enough time coordinating within their local congregation. So I'm curious, as you began to flesh this idea out and pull these groups together and make the invitation for them to join in, was it a challenge to bring everyone on board, or was this something that they were all really eager to get involved with?
Both. I think everyone was eager to get involved with it, but it was definitely a challenge. Over a year ago, the site launched in April, but the process took over a year. I convened a meeting in Nashville with communicators from all of the general agencies. And that was more of a listening session to find out, what works and what doesn't work on your individual agency websites. And if we have this concept of creating one centralized website where information from across the agencies can be housed or will be housed, what does it need to have? Doesn't it need to have, and how should it work? And everyone was eager to share ideas, even to share warnings and to share things that would and wouldn't work.
Yeah.
One of the issues we had to address was, how does this interact or interplay with other agency websites? It's going to
Mm-hmm.
take over websites or it's going to divert traffic. And that was a question we really wanted to answer and to say affirmative no. We want Resource UMC to be the starting point or the final destination for leaders who are trying to find information. If you start with Resource UMC and you end up on discipleship ministries or you end up with race and religion, as long as you find what you're looking for, then
Right.
we've been successful in doing that. And I think you mentioned Google. We know Google's awesome for, hey, you put something in there, you're going to get 50 or 50,000 different places to find it.
Yeah.
Well, at least with Resource UMC, you're starting within the United Methodist Church's framework because there are a lot of external sources out there. But that's one of the things we want to be, want to provide for UMC leaders is those things that are particular to this denomination.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the idea of a resource hub isn't new, though it is one that's certainly catching on in the church world. One of the first ones that came on my radar was through Life Church, which of course isn't Methodist, but even within our denomination, Adam Hamilton's United Methodist Church of the Resurrection has started their own resource portal. But these sites from individual churches tend to be filled with sermon series, graphics, small group curriculum, and other things that a local church might be creating or using in their programs. But how is Resource UMC different thanks to its ability to pull in content from across the denomination? What are maybe some of the valuable things people might find here that they're not going to find elsewhere?
I think what makes it different primarily is that it's built with the United Methodist Church leader in mind. And I think a lot of times when you go to external sites or other sources, you don't necessarily have those things that are made for this denomination. There's a lot of adjustment that has to be made. And I
Right.
think, out of Hamilton's church, or the Church of Resurrection resource, it's really great. But I think we're trying to be a little more expansive and also be able to look on a broader level and really encompass all of the agencies, which is what really makes it different. This is all of our church agencies in one place that gets you started. There's also attention to languages, because that's Spanish, Korean, looking at French. And I think the biggest point is not necessarily exclusivity of resources, but availability, making those things,
Right.
or accessibility rather, making those things accessible. On Resource UMC, when you're searching, you can do it not only by agency, but by topic or by subject matter. And it really, hones your search, enables you to find information from across the different agencies on a particular subject that you may be interested in. So instead of hopping around 5 agency websites to see what's there on Advent, you do a search. Everything that's there across the church is right in front of you, and your search has been streamlined instantly. Now, I'll say it's a living, breathing organism, and when you and when you migrate tons, I'll say, of content and data,
Right.
there's still some work. There'll always be work in, how do we organize this? How do we make it easy to find? And we're always open to suggestions and recommendations from communicators or just anyone in the church who stumbles upon the site.
Well, and I think that thematic organization is so valuable because, like you said, you may be searching for something like we may naturally head to umdiscipleship.org to search for something from Advent. But if we search Advent at Resource UMC, we might find something from an agency we didn't realize was creating Advent content, but their particular view of Advent or their particular entry point or perspective might spark something within us or provide us a unique resource we didn't even know existed.
Exactly. And I mean, for your average church leader, especially, that can be extremely helpful. I mean, imagine looking at Advent and finding something if West Pass wanted to say, hey, Advent's a reminder of open enrollment time or
Right.
check your benefits
Right.
time or what are your contributions looking like? You have an Advent calendar, maybe you ever have a contribution calendar. Or you may find out that, wow, I didn't know higher ed was doing something to sponsor our UMC related institutions during Advent. Or wow, there's a communications resource there. I think not only does it help you find things that you know about or looking for in particular, but also puts you in a wheelhouse or in a sandbox of things that are related and that may be helpful from you without leading you, too far off of your path.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're recording this between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So in the Advent season of 2019,
Mhm.
it'll come out in early 2020. But no doubt our listeners remember the Tom Hanks movie about Mr. Rogers. And Discipleship was actually invited to create study guide materials and
Mhm.
discussion guides to go along with the movie, which was incredible and not something that I realized we had done until I started poking around resourceumc.org. And this is really maybe a good entry point to talk about the fact that this site is not just for clergy or staff at church, but there are things of value for wider church leadership, but maybe our lay members as well.
Exactly. And when I say leaders, it's a really broad definition of leader. For me, it means anyone who's going beyond their individual or personal spiritual well being and wants to explore something that may be helpful for another member, or I'm interested in joining choir or starting a small group, or I just want to do something to help my church spread the word about a certain season. That's what Resource UMC is for. It's really aimed at that local church leader, whether that's a pastor, whether that's someone in the pastor's staff, whether that's a member who just wants to do a little more. This site is designed to help you find resources and information that'll help you to do that. And I think the reason it's important that we serve as that hub is a lot of that information may not be produced by UMCom, and
Right.
someone may not know where to look. I mean, it's really hard to figure out what does what does this agency do? I mean, we're still battling that question. What exactly do you guys do, or what does this agency do? What do you provide? I think it's
Yeah.
helpful to be able to do a search and find something and say, "How wow, this thing is interesting and it's produced by Church and Society. Let me explore a little bit to see what else this agency has and how it can help our local church or our congregation." And I think even sparking that interest or putting someone on the path to find more information or to have things that can help strengthen and grow the local church is awesome. That's a success for us.
Well, and we have obviously an excellent resource in umc.org, which is really a great, maybe general intro to the church for people who aren't that familiar with Methodism. And it
Mhm.
doesn't dig too terribly deeply into the various agencies and entities unless you really dig deep. But what I love about Resource UMC is it's also almost an intro book for someone who is already United Methodist and wants to understand how all of these things work together. Because every once in a while, we'll see the church and society sign on Capitol
Mhm.
Hill pop up on social media, or every once in a while we'll have a United Methodist News Service article cross on social media. But there may be agencies or groups we don't know about. There certainly are ones that we might not know how to contact, and almost every agency and almost every group within the wider denomination has an intro page and contact information here. Everything from United Methodist Communications to West
Yes.
Path to even General Conference. And I'm wondering if you're expecting some seasoned United Methodists and maybe find some surprises here too.
Of course, and I think you're right on point. I think even as seasoned as you get in United Methodism, there's so much there to discover and to learn about and to grow from that it's good to have one place for that to happen. Because what we'll see a lot of times is pastors saying, "Wow, there, something on the news, or there's an issue here. What's the church saying about it?" But I can go
Mm-hmm.
right here and find talking points on it. Or members of my congregation want to know, why do we baptize, or why do we have these things going on? What's the church opinion on Halloween? Where you can, ask the UMC right there on Resource UMC and get an answer to that quickly. So, it's designed not just for in-depth research and study, but also if you're a pastor or you're a leader or you're someone who's going to work and someone's asked you a question about your church, here's where you can find that
Right.
answer a lot of times. And even if if you are more seasoned and you want to get a little more in depth with things, you can do that as well.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a resource for lay members as well. Every once in a while, I'll have someone in my church come ask me about an agency that I'm maybe a little rusty on, and I'm just so grateful that this can become my one answer rather than trying to remember all the various web addresses and all the acronyms and all of the insider language. Just send them to resourceumc.org, and of course, before you know it, they're going to find something else they want to ask you about. So this is maybe a tool, but it's also going to take up some good discipleship time for us. And now, Tyrus, let me ask you, as the director of leader communications, how are you specifically and maybe even selfishly from your role hoping to see Resource UMC impact leaders and congregations
Well,
around the globe?
first off, I think the first thing I'd like to see is exactly what you said. you're in a leadership position in a church, members are coming and asking you, hey, how can I find this, or how can I find out more about this agency? And you can send them to one place. And sending them to a place that answers their question and gives them the information they need is awesome. And, possibly frees you up to serve other members and to do other things. I think ultimately what I want to see is this website help leaders do their jobs more effectively, help leaders to make disciples and send those disciples out to change the world by saying, if here's some information you need, here's a resource, this is something that'll guide you on that journey. What I want to see is Resource UMC be the first and best choice for doing that. We live in an information society now. Everybody has a phone out. Everybody wants information quickly. People are busy. And I think for anyone in the church who's doing God's work, if there's an answer you need, or if there's something you need to support what you're trying to do, hopefully Resource UMC makes it easy to do that, makes it not taxing to do that, because you get on a Google Trail
Right.
and your head's about to explode once you've gone down 50 different paths. That we can make it make searching and
Yeah.
finding information, make it simple, make it easy, and make it effective. And I think working at an agency level where you're disconnected to some degree from the local church, or really seeing things in action firsthand all the time, knowing that leaders can say, go to Resource UMC, and just making that referral to a website is helpful, is helping people grow spiritually, is helping leaders to develop and push the church's mission forward, that I will feel like the work I'm doing is not in vain.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure that our regular listeners, as they're poking around Resource UMC, one part of the page that may jump out to us that might not quite jump out quite as much to other people, the email list for Resource UMC. We've talked on multiple episodes of this podcast how important it is to build an email list, how valuable it can be. It's an owned channel, it's still a place of trust. But of course, an email list is only effective if the messages are valuable to those who receive it. And as we, church communicators, who are the ones who are sometimes struggling to make our own email lists valuable, we can be a little suspicious. So, Tyrus, here is your opportunity to make a direct appeal to our listeners. Why should they sign up to join the email list at Resource
Well, we
UMC?
have a newsletter called The Source that highlights the most recent or most effective resources that have been designated and that are out there. And people should sign up for The Source or Resource UMC email list to stay informed and to stay abreast of what's out there. Sometimes it may be hard to log in and explore the website. The Source newsletter will give you a quick overview of what's new, what's hot, what you need to look at. You can forward it to people and give them the same thing. And it only comes every couple of weeks, so you're not overwhelmed or inundated with emails. But sign up to stay informed and to stay in touch, because things are happening really quickly right now in the church. There are significant things that are going on. We know General Conference 2020 is fast approaching. Resource UMC is a way to stay connected, stay informed, and to strengthen your
That's
leadership.
great, because like with things like the Mr. Rogers discussion guides, you don't want to wait until you're stuck needing something to just come and Google search it. If you have a curated list like this of what's new and what's most relevant, it's going to be really valuable to those of us who are maybe looking for content, maybe looking for things to share through our own social media and on our own email list for our congregations. Well, Tyrus, do you have any final thoughts, words of encouragement, or calls to action for our community of church communicators?
Well, first is thank you. Thank you for the hard work. Thank all communicators for being a source of ideas, of inspiration for me and for UMCom, and also to kind of keep us in check and say, hey, here's some areas you can improve on as an agency to help us out. I think our annual conference communicators, our local church communicators, are doing an excellent job of not only creating content, but sharing things that are created here. And I just like to call upon our communicators to say, hey, you are a source of information, you are a source of knowledge, and we'd love to spread that throughout the connection and use this Resource UMC platform and UMCom's megaphone to get the great things that you're doing out there. A lot of resources that we find are produced by our annual conference communicators or even from a local church. Sometimes we may have to make some adaptations, and of course, we'll ask permission and work with them on that. But to say your work's appreciated and we'd love to magnify it and get it out there.
That's so great. I love that invitation because so many of us oftentimes feel like we're recreating the wheel each time
Yes.
we're starting something new. So if you are one of our listeners out there and you have cracked the code on one of the big challenges local churches face, all of us would love to hear from you, and we'd all love to learn from one another. So listeners, now we do want to hear from you. What resources from the denomination do you use most in your congregation? And what resources would you like Tyrus and his team to look into bringing to Resource UMC? You can email us at podcast@umcom.org, and we just might share your answers on a future episode. And of course, you can always use that email, podcast@umcom.org, to send us any feedback or topic suggestions you have for the show. We love hearing from you. Tyrus, thanks so much for taking time to be with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
You bet. Well, listeners, if you have found this podcast and Tyrus's information helpful, we would love to make sure other church communicators like yourself find this resource. The two biggest things you can do are to share this episode with your friends and colleagues and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, or whatever service you're listening to us on right now. Thanks again for listening to the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast.